I'm Jim.
And I'm Garrett.
And this is Jim and Garrett at the movies. Hey, Garrett, how's it going?
It's good. It's good to be back in Indiana. It's good to be in the same location, second week in a row.
I know. Together again.
Reunited, and it feels so good.
Yeah, you'll get us demonetized.
Yeah, probably.
All right. Not that we're monetized. All right. So tonight we will be reviewing ladies in comedy movies. We'll start with Late Night. We paired that with Punchline, which I think was a really sort of clever call on your part, I think.
Apt pairing, I agree.
Yeah. So let's start with Late Night. This is the new film, written by Mindy Kaling, starring Mindy Kaling and Emma Thompson. John Lithgow, Ike Barinholtz shows up for a hot minute. Hugh Dancy and Max Casella co-star in this film about a late night talk show host who is about to lose her show, and Mindy Kaling is the one female writer that she hires. The film is about their friendship and their budding friendship and their desire or their quest to sort of save the late night talk show. So Garrett, what did you think of this movie?
Well, I was in some ways a little surprised because you go into a film about late night talk shows and you sort of imagine it to be particularly funny, and I didn't find it all that funny, but nonetheless, I did find it to be reasonably compelling. I thought it worked as a lighthearted drama.
Mm-hmm.
I thought there's some really good characterization, some interesting relationships going on, and I think it's tackling some real issues in the culture and doing it in a way that's intelligent but not heavy-handed, relevant but not pedantic. And so there's a lot that works about it, even though it doesn't succeed in, I think, what a lot of people might expect the obvious area to be, namely the comedy.
Right. Okay. So you said a lot there. Let's flesh some of it out because I think that's a good sort of broad overview for our discussion about this movie. You talked about its timely themes and some of the things that it's tackling. Can you sort of tell us more about what you're talking about?
Well, late night comedy has been notoriously cutthroat, notoriously dominated by white men, which, like many industries, is something that nowadays is starting to be recognized as unworkable, both for commercial and for political and moral reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And the film tackles a lot of this. It very much explores this idea of Mindy Kaling's character as the diversity hire,
Mm-hmm.
and how exactly it is that should be thought of and how it should be reflected. And it never sort of, lectures the audience on what that means or what they should think about it. But it certainly invites at several stages different ways of thinking about the concept of a diversity hire and whether or not that's something that's problematic or whether or not it's something actually that's treated too much in a tokenish fashion, or whether or not it's, for that matter, even anything to be ashamed of or anything that's problematic in any sense whatsoever. So there's certainly a lot that can be reflected on, and no doubt this is, I think, drawn from Mindy Kaling's personal firsthand experience in comedy, which is, she has a fairly long resume, and no doubt has been drawing on some of these experiences for some time, I imagine.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I don't know. She hasn't really. I haven't seen her discuss some of that. It's entirely possible that that's true. Yeah, and there's parts of this that certainly feel authentic. But overall, I think I'd have to say that whereas you say that this film isn't lecturing the audience, I say that this film isn't exploring those themes enough. I think that this film is the word that sort of came to me in the hour after we watched this movie is that it's conventional and safe.
Yes. Safely feminist, I think, was your exact word.
Safely feminist was, yeah, I mean, this is it's a feminist film, and that's a good thing, but it's feminist in a safe and non-conventional, non-threatening way.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the film that is going to incite a Tucker Carlson rant. Not that we need another Tucker Carlson rant, but this isn't going to offend. This is the brand of feminism that isn't going to offend anybody.
Tucker, we know you're watching, so please just keep it down. We don't need to be put on blast again.
Yeah, sorry, Tucker. I mean, we like to give you as much material as possible, but take the summer off.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, the white male characters aren't villainized or demonized in any way. They're shown as being a little stodgy and recalcitrant, but ultimately human and approachable. And
I mean, a couple of them are pretty pretty high class assholes.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that they were demonized in a Harvey Weinstein sense, but they were certainly assholes, and they didn't behave well, and they're not sort of nice human beings, except for maybe one who kind of has a third act turn. But yeah, I guess the word that I'm using for this film is that it's safe and it's conventional and it's a bit formulaic. And that has to do with Mindy Kaling's journey as the diversity hire, which is a word used in the film, a phrase used in the film often. And, that's a sort of safe story that ends up having a rather predictable end to it. And also with the Emma Thompson character, I didn't think that there were enough stakes. It was almost as though if the plot has her about to lose her show, and at the end of the first act and at the beginning of the film, it is suggested that her show has kind of lost its muster. She's not interested in viral clips or anything, all that, anything that would up the ratings. And so for Emma Thompson's character, I never really thought that the script gave her enough stakes, because if she loses her show, then what happens to her aside from a bruised ego? There's nothing that's really high pressure about this. And for that, in that sense, I felt that even the Emma Thompson plot line was safe, conventional, formulaic, didn't really do much for me.
I think they say that she's been on the show for 28 years or 23 years, something like that. But at the same time, they also established early on that she really only has two things in her life: her husband and her show. So losing half of the things in her life seems like reasonably high stakes to me.
Yeah, but Emma Thompson as a performer is able to some degree raise this, but raise the stakes for herself and give this some sort of urgency. But I don't think the script really did. Yes, I understand that she's got the show and her husband, and her husband is ill and the show is dying. I get that, but it's not. I wish that we would have seen something more vital, something more energetic from Thompson's character. Her. The emotional stakes of the performance being raised to the point where she's angry or sad, very sad, or depressed or railing. Instead, she's just withering to everybody. And I felt that was, while Thompson is good at that, I didn't think that it necessarily made me care about the character.
I think she was pretty depressed all throughout, and I think they actually established that with a certain degree of subtlety. They established her as a character who maybe isn't self-loathing per se. That's probably a little too much, but she definitely is, I think, struggling with depression. And they established that explicitly, but they also sort of imply that. I've seen people of that same sort of type who deal with their depression by being imperious and hostile, and demanding. And it struck me as somewhat plausible. But another word that you also used in there, which I want to push back against, is formulaic. I think that the script actually avoids being formulaic quite ably. There's several points at which it could have taken a much more formulaic route. Again, I think I can say this without spoiling too much. It's not like Mindy Kaling just waltzes in and solves all the problems by being so good at her job and showing all these career white boys that they've been living in a bubble and doing it wrong this whole time. And it's not to reverse one of the things that they make fun of, a brown savior complex. They show her
quote
as,
unquote.
Yeah, quote unquote. They show her as having sort of a novel, fresh perspective, but they also put her in her place by making her realize that you don't have any of the experience. You're coming in here on your first day, your first week, and telling everyone else their business. Isn't how show business works. It's how an outsider fantasy of show business works.
Sure.
And I think lesser movies have played with that, so the viewer can imagine themselves being that savior, coming in and having so many good ideas that they have to take you seriously.
Yeah, but I mean, still, by the end of the movie, it takes all of the turn. It ends up in all of the places that you know it's going to end up.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it's going to end up, but definitely I wasn't completely satisfied with the ultimate resolution for some of the main conflicts. But I do think that it shows the problems that they're dealing with as complex problems that don't have easy solutions. Again, lesser films sort of show, oh, here's a contrived problem that you have this brilliantly reverse engineered comedic solution for, and Mindy Kaling delivers it and it solves the problem.
Right.
And there's no moments like that, but there's several moments that could have been like that. And I think wisely and maturely, Kaling's script doesn't play into that and shows realistic problems in a complex, multifaceted way that to my mind, it was quite emotionally mature and satisfying as an audience member.
Interesting. Yeah. So there you have it. I mean, I certainly think the film is far safer than Garret does. I think the film is far less conventional. I don't think it takes as many risks as you do, and I don't think it's as complex as you seem to find it. And part of it, like, I can sort of go through that, but some of it would require some spoilers,
right.
And I don't necessarily want to do that. Is there anything else you want to say about this before we close it up?
Well, some slight further criticisms. Again, sure. I already noted again that the film wasn't as funny as I would have liked it to be, and that I wasn't really satisfied with sort of the resolution of the main conflict.
Right.
But I think it's also worth noting that some of the pacing is a little off. It's structurally speaking, it's a little peculiar. It's hard to sort of find the rhythm and find the beats where everything sort of shifts. And again, some of that I think you can credit as being slightly unconventional, but it also makes it a little hard to sort of to get caught up in it, and to sort of fully let the inertia of the story carry you along. You kind of have to sort of have some patience with it at certain points in order for it to catch up with where the conventional film vernacular, if you will, would tell you the film is supposed to be by this point in the time run. So
right. Yeah. I mean, structurally, it is kind of weird. I mean, you and I were after we walked out of the theater, we even had an argument about who the protagonist was, and the fact that we're having an argument about who the protagonist was means that we're not really sure who the protagonist was. And when you have a structure where two reasonably intelligent film goers can go to the movie and then each have a different idea of who the protagonist in the movie was, then yeah, I think you're right when you're highlighting some unconventional aspects of the script. And in fact, I might even be a little more down on the film and say that it's structurally a little bit of a mess.
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a problem. I don't think all films have to follow a typical 3-act structure, and I kind of, again, I like that the film is taking some chances and doing things not radically outside the box, but marching to its own drum, as it were. And even if it does cause it to suffer somewhat, it's a relatively minor problem as far as issues within film go.
So what do you give it out of 5?
3.5 out of 5.
Wow. Okay. I'm at 2 out of 5. So I've sort of fallen since the time is since I've had time to digest the film, and for that sense, it's not a recommend for me. So we've got 1 thumb down, 1 thumb up. We will see what we have to say about our next film. I think this is as we mentioned in the intro, kind of a good pairing here. Punchline, 1988's Punchline, directed by David Seltzer, starring Sally Field, Tom Hanks, and John Goodman. This is the story of 2 comedians, one a housewife from New Jersey, and the other a dropped-out medical student who are trying to make it in New York stand-up comedy in the late 1980s. Now, a couple things about this film before we sort of dive into it and dive into its plot structure and performances. This will be a spoiler review of a film that's 30 years old. It's definitely dated. There are some sort of racist tropes that the comedy plays with, and that datedness definitely, like, I remember seeing this film. Oh, it was probably early 90s, mid 90s. And I remember sort of, cocking my head at it a little bit. This time I damn well cringed at some of the more difficult and ridiculous racist tropes that get played. So it's dated, But what does it have to say about comedy? What does it have to say about women in comedy? What does it have to say about um, these particular characters? I think it is an interesting three-character study. So we'll get into that. What did you think? This is your first time seeing Punchline, right?
Yes, I had seen scenes from it before, but it's my first time seeing the whole thing all the way through. And I feel like I have to qualify the first my first reaction because I don't want people to get the wrong impression of me and my opinions of women in comedy. But I had a similar reaction, in that even though this is a film about comedy, I didn't find it terribly funny.
Right.
And again, Sally Field's character in particular, very believable, very plausible, excellent performance. And I felt that she was a struggling comedian trying to find her voice and trying to get it right. And as a performance, that works. But as comedy, it just didn't. Now, again, I want to caution this because it sounds like I'm playing into that bullshit trope about how women can't be funny. It's three female comedians wrote them, so in two films saying that they're not funny. I want to make clear, I'm not saying that at all. Women can be fucking hilarious. It's just in these two particular films, it didn't strike my funny bone, as it were.
Yeah, and same here. Like I won't jump into that idea either. I think both of these films, I think Late Night is trying to be a comedy a little bit more than Punchline is. I think Punchline is rather unapologetically a drama first and a comedy second. I mean, you don't have some of the scenes that are in this film if you're playing it for straight comedy. I think certainly Hanks's character's breakdown when he sees his father and brother in the audience and how he sort of feels like he is a disappointment. That's not a film. That's not a scene that you have in a straight comedy. That's a scene that you have in a drama with comedic elements. And so I think these films aren't necessarily always trying to be straight comedies where they get their mileage out of the laughs. I think that's more true about Late Night than it is Punchline.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. But at the same time, for a film which clearly loves stand-up and which is clearly wanting to pay homage and be something of a love letter to the stand-up comedy scene in New York, there's not that many laughs in the film. I mean, at least even like in the sections that are supposed to be explicitly funny, like the stand-ups when they're on stage. In this respect, it's very similar to the film Funny People, which I think it could have played it safer and said, here are some of the funniest comedians in the world doing some of their funniest bits. And there's some of that there in both Funny People and in Punchline. But overall, again, I think it does a better job of portraying a realistic rather than a hilarious picture. It shows not just comics bombing, which you obviously have to put that in there because that's part of the experience of stand-up, but comics just middling. Comics just making so bits as they try to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and that's an honest reflection of how hard it is to be a comedian. You can be the funniest guy in your office and still suck as a stand-up because stand-up comedy is fucking hard.
It really is.
And Punchline does a really good job of showing how difficult that is.
One of the things I like about Punchline is the scene in the subway when Sally Field's character and Tom Hanks' character are actually working on a bit.
And they're riffing on it.
Yeah, and he's going, okay, tell me about your life. Okay, what happened? You have 3 kids. Do you have a babysitter? Yeah, you have a babysitter. Okay, what's his name? Charles Manson. Okay, keep going with that. Keep going. Like, that is how stand-up comedy gets written. It's written in these. Okay, where's my exaggeration? Where's my tie-in? What's the target of my joke? What's the exaggeration? I already said that. Those are the types of questions that stand-up comics ask, and I thought that scene in the subway perfectly captured that. One of the things that sort of the reason I like Punchline a little bit more than I like Late Night is because I find the journeys of these characters to be much more relatable and much more down to earth. These are struggling comics trying to make it big, which is something that I can identify with, as opposed to a woman who's had success in the twilight of her career, and is her career going to be over or not? Like that's the fact that she has had success at all sort of puts her a cut above this struggling housewife who's trying to manage this husband who really doesn't understand her, and this bone deep goal that she seemed to have always had to try to make people laugh, and how she that's personally connected to making the world a better place for her. Like that's a real character dimension and something that really tied me to Sally Field's character in this. And one of the things I really like about Punchline is I think it knows its characters almost a little bit better than Late Night, to be honest. And that's, yeah. So go ahead.
I think one of the things, again, that it does really well is show both the competitiveness and the camaraderie of fellow comedians backstage. That they work together, but they also recognize that they're competing in a fairly limited pool for success, for attention, and then while that they're friends and they like each other, they also don't want to like each other too much and don't want to let their guard down too much. Don't want to trust each other too much. And where those lines are drawn is an interesting thing to see, because it's complex, it's multifaceted, and it allows you to see different angles on the same characters, both your primary and your secondary characters.
Yeah, let's talk for a little bit about Tom Hanks's character. What did you think about his character first, and then his performance second?
Well, the character, I think, is in many ways probably the funniest character in the bit, and that's, I think, written that way. So he's sort of presented as the next golden boy, the up and coming character. And so it makes sense that he got the funniest jokes.
Well, I also found him not funny as well. So if you think I just find the women unfunny, I found Tom Hanks unfunny as well. But yes, I do think that that's how he serves the film structurally. Like, he is supposed to be funny, even if I myself don't find
and
him funny.
Again, I asked you as we were watching this if Tom Hanks had ever done stand-up, because one of the things which Hanks nails is the mechanics of comedy. The rhythm, the stage presence, the repartee he has with his audience. He felt like a polished, practiced stand-up. So I don't know if you said you didn't think you ever had.
I don't know. Yeah,
but whatever kind of research he did for the role, I think he definitely got the feel of an up and coming, strong comedian who's making his mark, but who also recognizes that he's running on borrowed time.
Yeah. And I thought it was really kind of cool to see Tom Hanks play an asshole. I mean, right now he's working on Mr. Rogers, and in Punchline 1988, he's just a kind of a dick. And he plays an asshole pretty well, at least late 80s Tom Hanks does.
And this sort of brings again to, I think, one of the failings of the film. I think Hanks's performance is solid. Again, there's several moments where he plays pathos rather powerfully.
Yeah.
But at the same time, fairly central for his character's conflict is the love story he has with Sally Field. Now, never mind the fact that I think, was it 6 years later?
Yes.
6 years later, Sally Field plays his mother in Forrest Gump, which, again, speaks to some of the sexist bullshit double standards that Late Night was dealing with, but in cinema rather than in Late Night. But at the same time, again, that age issue aside, I have no idea why Tom Hanks's character falls in love with Sally Field's character. The love, the plot is just implausible and unbelievable. It's
supposed to be in that one montage where he takes her out and she's up there getting laughs and all that. Like, that's, I understand that montage is supposed to set up this love story, but I don't think it works either. And I think the film structurally is a bit of a mess, and that has a lot to do with that character, a lot to do with Tom Hanks's character, because really this is a film about a woman trying to make it in stand-up, meets a guy who tries to help her, and then they end up getting into a little bit of a rivalry. If the film wants to spend so much time with Tom Hanks's character, the film seems to think he's the most interesting one, even though structurally it is saying that Sally Field's character is the one that whose journey we're actually following.
Yeah, the film could have played the love story better. If you make the love story more believable, the film's more engaging. It also could have played the competitive nature better. Best of all would be to have both.
Right.
And it sort of goes half in on both the competitive and on the love story. And while neither fail miserably, neither are so bad that they ruin the film. Both shortcomings, I think, undermine the film. And you can sort of see that in the conception phase and in the treatment phase, it had higher ambitions than it actually managed to pull off in the final product.
Let's talk about John Goodman. What did you think?
I mean, John Goodman, what can you say about John Goodman, man? Right? I mean, John Goodman is. I don't know if I've ever seen John Goodman play a bad role. I don't think I've ever seen him in a part that wasn't um, uh, competent and solid. But one of the interesting things about this is that again, there was a safe dimension that they could have played where they just made him an asshole, just made him a husband that doesn't understand his wife, a holdover from misogynistic era, just wants his wife to be a housewife, and there's that side of him there, and it's easy to see why that frustrates Sally Fields' character. But they also, I think, ably show him to be a family man that loves his family, loves his wife, loves his daughters, and is genuinely trying to get to a state where he can reconcile his own vision of what his home life wants to be like, but also allow his wife to be happy at the same time.
He does have a sense, sort of 50s morality that's built into him, and he is trying to adjust with the times in many ways, not successfully. Until the end, when we get to see him say, and it's a beautiful moment at the in the third act of the film when he says, "Can I come too? Let me be part of this thing with you." I think that was profound. I think, and Goodman plays it ably. Like, Goodman is pitch perfect in this movie, and I almost wish that. I almost wish they would do a rewrite of this movie where it would be Sally Fields' character as the main character, John Goodman's character is sort of a supporting and sort of antagonistic character, and you sort of put the Tom Hanks character to the side a little bit. I think that's structurally what the film needs. I understand why they were like, "Well, we got Tom Hanks, we gotta have him do something." I understand why they did that, but structurally, the film needs a little bit more of this relationship between Sally Field and John Goodman's characters.
I think, again, if you wanted to be critical there, you could say that it's a little easy to hate John Goodman's character, but I think that's a more convenient stance to take today than it would have been in 1988 when the film was made, because, he kind of has this dated thing, and I think you could say that his reversal at the end, his third act turn, was a little bit of a layup. They didn't do too much to earn his changing of his opinion on her career.
I do see that set up in the that third act turn doesn't come as much of a surprise.
It doesn't come as much of a surprise. Again, it's not wholly unmotivated, but it also is the sort of. Again, there's two obvious ways in which the film can end. One is, what happens, he comes around, and the other is that she leaves him because he's a backward asshole.
For Tom Hanks.
Yeah, for Tom Hanks, or even, just to go off and pursue a career in comedy and on her own. And so it's not that it's unearned, it's that it is a little obvious.
Yeah. So any other overall thoughts about the movie?
I thought that anyone who watches Punchline today can't help but draw comparisons to is the Amazon show The Marvelous Miss Maisel, which does.
You've seen, I haven't.
Yes, so. And I think it is a similar concept, actually set in the 50s, I think, if I recall. And again, a housewife who's misunderstood, who discovers a passion for comedy and goes out there. What I think Miss Maisel does better, and in fairness, it is a series, so it has more time to do this, to get invested in the characters and to sort of watch the development over time. But The Marvelous Miss Maisel shows the comics being genuinely funny. I mean, Miss Maisel in particular is fucking hilarious and a natural. And if it were, again, even just subtly done worse, it would feel cheap. It would feel like it wasn't organic, like it was just comedians taking their absolute A material and giving it to an actress to read. But her, the lead actress's name, which is escaping me at the moment,
Rachel Brosnahan.
Rachel Brosnahan, thank you. Makes the character so livid, so compelling, so fully realized that her stand-up material is very clearly an organic extension of the character that's established. It would have been, again, I think, a serious improvement to Punchline if it could have captured that magic, if it could have taken this character and not just made her sympathetic and interesting and see the struggles of comedy, but have her deliver some genuinely just firecracker, grade A class act stand-up comedy, at least at the end, if not throughout the whole piece.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think it's trying. It's just not. Its comedy isn't working for me. Might be because it's dated as well.
Yeah,
it might be because In 1988, that was funny. I know that Tom Hanks's character is to some degree playing off of some of that Sam Kinison style of comedy, which I think doesn't really work today. The closest thing that we've got to a Sam Kinison right now is Anthony Jeselnik, who just tries to say the most inappropriate and offensive thing as a punchline and hope people laugh at it. And that seems to be the Hanks character. And I don't think that works.
Yeah. And again, it's worth reiterating. Comedy, whether late night or stand-up, is fucking hard. It's one of those things that I think both of these films, again, perhaps intentionally, perhaps unintentionally, show the difficulty of it in the different ways in the different venues. But I think they both give realistic portrayals of the challenges of people working to entertain people, to make people laugh.
To make people laugh is one of the hardest things to do. I mean, it's probably easier to make people cry than it is to make people laugh.
Yeah, or to jump scare them or some such like that, right?
To go in a horror movie. Yeah.
I mean, and some emotion, all emotions can be got at in a cheap and direct way. And again, I think it's to both of these films' credits that they, for the most part at least, try to go for the honest portrayal of the of hard comedy, rather than either going for cheap laughs or simply making like a sort of wish fulfillment-y characters who can just bring the house down every single time because they're that good, that witty, that funny. Would have been entertaining, would have been funny, but it also would have felt less realistic, less plausible.
But let's not say that Punchline is completely unfunny. It's not.
Yes.
There's one sequence where Sally Field has to plan a dinner for prospective clients of her husband, and so she runs in, and there's this long sequence where she's preparing everything, throwing things behind her, getting the candles lit by doing having somebody hold a lighter, and on and on and on. That's brilliantly choreographed and very, very funny. And of course it ends with that great bit where the child tells an inappropriate joke to the churchgoers.
Both films have genuine moments of levity and genuine laughs. It's not that they're not funny, it's that they're not as funny as one might imagine for films about late night comedy or stand-up comedy. I
mean, I would say that Punchline's way funnier than Late Night, but we'll we'll agree to disagree on that one. So anything, what do you want to rate it out of 5?
3, same, 3.5.
3.5 for me as well. So yeah, Punchline's a bit of a recommend, more of a recommend for Late Night for me. But join us next week when we will be talking about one film that will definitely be rating higher than the two films that we talked about today, and that is the pairing film Shaun of the Dead, which we are pairing with the new Jim Jarmusch movie, The Dead Don't Die, if I got that right. So yes, join us next week where we'll be talking about the new Jim Jarmusch film. We'll also be talking about Shaun of the Dead, the great Edgar Wright film, which spoiler alert, I really like that movie. All right. So until then, I'm Jim.
And I'm Garrett.
And this has been Jim and Garrett at the Movies. Good night, everybody.